welcome back to the channel. This is episode 2, which is my story of psychosis, which I've decided to call a timeless maze of anxiety and cannabis tangents, which sounds a little bit complicated and probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but when you listen to the story, it'll all kind of come together. So before we start, I just want to give just like a little overview of what psychosis is. Usually if someone suffers from psychosis, they have a psychotic episode, which can happen to anyone. It's usually between the ages of 18 and 25. And during that time, people can have very strange thoughts. It's like a detachment from reality, where people can have hallucinations, which can be any of the 5 senses, so they can like smell, taste, feel, like touch things that aren't there. Voices are very common, and sounds, and also visual hallucinations. So that in a nutshell is what a psychotic episode is. Obviously that's very, very brief, but yeah. So my story started, I'll go back to when I was growing up and how I led up to the point where I became psychotic, or had a psychotic episode. And what I remember from being young is feeling a sense of detachment, or I felt sort of dislocated from the world. Things didn't really make sense. It was like I had pieces of information that I'd learned, and these pieces of information were like pieces of a jigsaw. So I was trying to build like an overall view of the world that I could understand and that would guide me. But like subjects at school would be like one jigsaw, for each subject. So there'd be like maths, English, science. Each would be a different sort of vision or a different lens of thinking. So there were like these different pictures, but I felt like my sort of jigsaw was just pieces from all of the different jigsaws put together in one box, so I couldn't possibly make a single picture, if that makes sense. I know that sounds kind of strange, but yeah. So I also think of it like a bit like a disco ball. If you think of like a disco ball with all the mirrors, probably without the fun, but like each mirror would be like a little piece of information, and I'd kind of like be trapped inside this ball, and people would see what they want to see when they spoke to me, because it's sort of coated in mirror. So if someone asked me something, I'd kind of have that piece of information like a parrot almost, and I could sort of reply from that piece, but I didn't really feel a sense of self. I was a good kid, really, but I was good. What I was good at is behaving. I didn't feel as though I was good at anything in particular. I was just good, So my thoughts were like, came in sort of chunks of information, along with my thoughts, and kind of personal speech. I didn't really flow very well. I always felt like adults knew something that I didn't know, or other people knew things that I didn't know, and I always wondered what that was. I always felt like I was sort of missing out on something, but I didn't know what that was. As I got older, well, I thought I used to think like computer games. I used to like computer games, and I kind of thought of everything being very sort of linear, like a linear path, where I'd be at school and I'd do my lessons, and then at the end of each term or at each school year, you'd have like an exam, and that would be like a boss. So you'd have to kind of go through this linear path where you have to beat these bosses, and at the end there would be some sort of linear future. Like everything was very sort of flat. It felt like sort of two-dimensional. And I didn't have a very, very strong sense of self. And I always kind of felt like to be sort of real in a way. I would kind of hold on to like memories, and the ones that really sort of stood out in my mind were the negative memories. So I think these sort of started off as like breadcrumbs in a way, like the story of Hansel and Gretel, where they kind of leave the breadcrumbs, like the defining incidents, like the things that made me are these series of breadcrumbs, these memories. And that's kind of how they started off. And then, as I got older, these memories weren't kind of a way back, but they became like rocks. So I would have these negative memories that I would carry around with me, and I would repeat obsessively. Like when things were bad, it's like all these things would come back to me, all these memories would sort of just start coming back to my mind, and I'll be like triggered by a particular incident, and then the incident would provoke these negative memories. And it's not that things were particularly bad. I mean, I had hard times, like everyone does, but I didn't really have any way of coping, any mechanisms or anything like that. So the only way that I knew was kind of resilience, which is to kind of crack on or man up sort of thing. I liked music like as a teenager, and music kind of had cryptic messages which like sort of taught me how to think or taught me how to live, and combined with like the beat of the music, like the lyrics, I felt like I could attach to. But then again, in the same way as a subject at school, the artists or the artists as a subject all have different opinions, and everything can be quite sort of confusing. I didn't really know who I was below that kind of that sort of surface. And it built up until I was in my sort of early 20s, and during that time I'd had quite a well-formed bag of rocks, I think of it like a bag of rocks in a carrier bag. So carrying these rocks and the handles stretching, and it's becoming really heavy, and the obvious thing to do would to be just to put that back down. But that's hard to do because you feel attached to the rocks, to the stories and the incidents and the negative things that have happened, and it feels unfair. And you just want to tell someone, and someone to go, yeah, that's out of order, that's wrong. And when you can't do that, you don't have that support, things can be very, very difficult. And I think for me, I did that for so long that the handles on the bag snapped, and that's when I became psychotic. So I was trapped at this particular time in my early 20s in this what had become a maze, and I would spend time sort of going over and over and over these stories, like regurgitating. It's like I would think of something that happened like years before, and I would have to compulsively or obsessively reenact that story in my mind, and I'd have to play it through, almost like like a video. But like I can sense and feel, and I know where I'd be in 2 hours. It was well mapped out. It was like a repertoire of these different things, which weren't really important, but at the time felt to me to be really important. Like, they aren't the things that make me, and I realise that now, but at the time I didn't. So it became like a maze, and I felt like I was trapped within the maze. And then I became interested in meditation. First of all, I smoked cannabis, which is where the cannabis tangents, because when I got to a point where I was spending a lot of time in this maze and I couldn't escape it. But the cannabis gave me a kind of an escape hatch where I could get out of the maze and spend some time still confused. Well, I don't think the maze was really confusing. It was anger, and the anger felt raw, and the anger felt real, and it felt more real than anything else. That was kind of what I had. It was kind of gritty, it was grounded, it was sort of almost solid, like a fist. If you you can feel that, and that's something solid in a way. It felt real. That felt like the real me. The angry me was the real me. So I used to, like I say, obsessively think about these things to feel real, I suppose. But it was exhausting. So I smoked cannabis to get out of that mindset where I would be more going off on sort of bizarre tangents. I'd think about different things. I wouldn't feel as angry. I'd just laugh a lot. I think of some things that I thought they were brilliant. Some ideas that seemed sort of otherworldly. And it almost became like a split. A schism, if that's the right word. So I knew it wasn't a permanent solution, but I did that for a little while, which may have caused my psychosis or contributed to that. But then a friend came back from Thailand, and he had a little like Buddha statue, and I thought, because I was looking into different things, different ways of thinking, different religions, and I looked up Buddhism in an encyclopedia, and what I read was like a ray of hope, really, because what it said was that, I don't know if this is the right pronunciation, but Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, had left. He was a prince, and he left the home, left his wife and children, and he went out to seek enlightenment. And he went through different trials, like he lost weight, he put weight on, he was like fasting, and interested in the idea of attachment. I hope I'm doing this justice, because and then he stumbled across a sick man, an old man, like a death, who became aware of death and his mortality. And then he sat and he meditated, and he became enlightened, and what he said was, that's the middle way. The middle way is the right way. A life of excessiveness. And I really liked that idea. It was only a paragraph that I read, but it just seemed to relate to me, because like I'd left the family home. I was going through a difficult time. I'd also, because I just finished college, and I'd won an award at college, which was quite prestigious, and in some ways the future was like looking really positive, but I didn't feel that. I felt like the opposite. I felt really low. So it was like the high expectations and the way that I felt were completely at odds with each other, and that was again another sort of stretch in another split in a way. I just felt like I was being pulled in different directions. So yeah, and I remember, because I brought a few books and I became interested, and the main thing that I learned, which came from the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, which the first one is that life is suffering, which seems like a really, really negative way of introducing someone to a way of thinking, but I could resonate with that because I was suffering, and even the word suffering had such a broad net. You know, it summed up so much. It wasn't down in the nitty gritty details of, it was just a broad net suffering. We don't want to suffer. Suffering is the enemy. And then it goes on to say that like suffering is caused by the mind. So that immediately located my maze in a way, the way that this prison that I was trapped in, this kind of ghost train. And then it said that there's a way out of suffering, which is to follow the Dharma, the words of the Buddha, and to follow the Eightfold Path. And I mean, I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not someone who. I mean, the philosophy is very simple, but to apply that and to live by that is very, very difficult and probably not practical in my life. Or maybe it is, but it's very difficult. So what so I tried meditation, which was kind of the next step, and I remember I found it really difficult at first. But I do remember the first time that I really kind of got it right, and I just felt like this, because I just sat down, cross-legged, focused on my breath, and I felt this maze kind of drift away that I was trapped in, and I just breathed and concentrated on my breath, let my thoughts come and go, and for about 15 minutes or so, and I opened my eyes, and it was like such a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I felt like everything was like buzzing, just like brimming with magic. It was just, there was a life, everything felt alive, and I felt alive, and it was a really unusual, great feeling that I'd not really felt before, or if I had, I didn't feel like I had control of it. It was just, yeah. It was, yeah. So that, and then I went on, that was actually before I had my psychosis. But that stayed with me, and that, I think, perhaps saved me through the darker times, because I had a sense of detachment from myself. It was almost like I could take my mind out and hold it in front of me, so I could see these, I could see the maze, but I could see it from a bird's eye view. So I could see the different parts, and it was like if you this sounds really silly, but like Screwball Scramble, if you remember that game, or maybe it's still around, I don't know. But you'd have a little marble, and you go through the different parts of the obstacle course, and that was kind of like the way that I felt. But the little ball, if that was like an eyeball, it does work. The little eyeball, so you all you see is the mayhem of going through all these things, and that was what my thoughts were like when I was in that particular state of mind. But if you could just pick up the ball and sort of hold it above, then that eyeball would be detached from the maze, and it would be like an eyeball would just roll around and it wouldn't see itself. It could try and look for itself, but it would kind of go mad, because the eyeball is the self. It's the pure consciousness, or the Atman in Hinduism, and it's the kind of watcher. So this is how I see things now, as there's two of me in a way. There's the egoic mind, or the maze, and then there's the watcher of the maze, who is just a pure consciousness, or a feeling, or an energy that just observes. And through meditation, I feel like I could achieve that state of mind. So I've escaped without using cannabis, through the sort of temporary escape hatch. I feel like I can do that. Below there's a link, and if you click on it, it'll take you to Amazon, where my book's now available. It's called The Taste of Words, and it's a book of poems that I've written. go and have a click.